Bada bing, bada boo.
Even when you're up in the sky, there is a hierarchy of classes, economic classes. I mean, yes, we have seen all of the memes of when people are sitting in their first class seat, drinking their little glassware champagne. They watch everybody else walk way to the back to their little seat of shame in 37D. But there's someone above first class too, quite literally. Private air travel. Private jets typically fly higher than commercial airlines. They fly 41,000 feet up in the sky, while commercial airliners generally stay at around 35,000 feet. The higher you fly, the less fuel you burn, and since private jets are typically lighter, they fly at higher altitudes. They're on top of us. There's less air traffic up there. Commercial airliners, sometimes you're stuck in a traffic jam. Not private jets. They have more direct routes in the skies. They fly more efficiently. There's less turbulence up there. And aside from the convenience of just going straight up to the plane, you can actually control who's joining you on the flight. If you don't like that person who's coughing behind you, they don't have to be on the flight. You don't like babies on the flight, babies don't have to be on the flight. And sometimes you even have the full discretion of all of the attendants and even the pilots. There have been many stories where a lot of private jet companies, when they hire pilots, when they hire flight attendants, they're signing some crazy NDAs, non-disclosures. They cannot talk about the clients that they fly. They cannot talk about the conversations that are had while they're in flight. You can't theoretically control them. You can't make them fly off the flight plan, but there is a level of control that you have when you're in a private jet. Perhaps they see something that you do, if it's not dangerous or if it's not illegal, maybe they just look the other way. 16-year-old Manohara is walking up to the private jet that's waiting for her. She's walking across the tarmac. She's climbing up the stairs. And her mom and her sister are getting their things from the car, because like the car parks right next to the jet. And they're about to walk right up behind her. They're just grabbing their luggage. She's halfway up the flight of stairs leading to the plane when she feels, it's like a sixth sense. That's how she describes it. Something is so weird about this. It just doesn't make sense. The energy of this plane is off. The vibes, the feng shui, the juju of this plane, however you want to describe it, the sixth sense radar is going off. She doesn't want to be here. She turns on her heels to go back down the steps to join her mom and her sister. But these two buff, burly looking guys, they run down from inside the plane. They run out of the plane onto the steps and they drag her by the arms and drag her up the stairs, throw her into a private jet seat. The flight attendants, they slam the door shut. And now she's on this private jet. She's screaming at every single person on the plane like, hello, my mother and my sister are down there. Why are you closing the door? Why are you forcibly yanking me up the jet? Like, what's going on? You need to let me off this plane. I don't want to be on this plane anymore. And they're looking at her like she's the crazy one. Like they did not just kidnap her right now. I'm sorry, ma'am. Please calm down. The engine to the plane has just started, which means that I am unable to open this door again. What do you mean you're unable to open the door? Then just turn the engine off. What are you even saying right now? The 5 bodyguards walk up to 16-year-old Manohara. They force her into the seat and they start manhandling her. If she tries to get up, they just slam her back down onto the seat. She's like this tiny little 16-year-old. These are 5 full-grown men. There's no way. She's not going to be able to fight these guys off. As for her mother and her sister, she can see them on the tarmac freaking out, and there's also some burly men holding them back. And with that, the plane just takes off, and there's nothing anybody can do. Her mom and her sister are just helplessly watching from the tarmac as 16-year-old Manohara is being kidnapped on a private jet. And the instructions were apparently very clear. Bring Manohara back to her husband, the Prince of Malaysia. We would like to thank today's sponsors who have made it possible for Rotten Mango to support the National Network to End Domestic Violence, a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating a world where partner-related workplace and stalking violence no longer exists. This episode's partnerships have also made it possible to support Rotten Mango's growing team, and we'd also like to thank you guys for your continued support as we work on our mission to be worthy advocates. As always, full show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com. A few disclaimers for today's case. There are a few mentions of DV and SA, so please be careful. With that being said, let's get into it. Imagine acupuncture, but you leave the needles in you. forever. You get up, you go about your day with needles forever embedded into you. They are one with you. I mean, it feels like there's absolutely no reason why anybody would want to do that unless it fixes your life, unless it brings you a lot of money. What if I told you if you stick 5 needles inside of you and keep them in there forever, you could be the most handsome person in town. You could be the richest person that you know. It's called susuk. It's a charm needle, and it's usually made of gold or silver. There are needles that are inserted into your body, into the soft tissue. So a lot of the times it's in the face, in the chin area, the cheeks, your back. And the needle has intention. Whether you asked for wealth, health, happiness, beauty, the shaman or the doctor, whoever is enchanting the charm needle will make sure it goes into the intended place and make sure that it has the intended goal. And you, as the person with the needles inside of you, you've got really one job. Okay, you've got 2 jobs. If you are to get an MRI, which is when they put you in that giant machine and you cannot have any metal on you. You can't wear a necklace, you can't wear earrings because they will fly out of your ear onto the machine. It's magnetic, it attracts metal. If you're gonna get an MRI, it would be beneficial to tell your doctor that you have metal needles inside of you. Otherwise, they will tear through your tissue to get to the MRI machines. You could also probably tell your doctor when you get an X-ray because they're gonna be in for a shock. That's like the main rule. But the other main rule is don't tell anyone where that charm is. Don't tell anyone where the needles are. The minute that you tell someone where it is and why it's there for, it loses its magic. It no longer is effective. But that doesn't mean that everybody tries really hard to find a unique spot. The most common spots for women are on the face, the back, and sometimes, this is not as common, but interestingly, in the private areas. To be embedded.
So when you say it's on the face, can you see it?
No, because it's in you. So you won't see it. It'll heal within a day. You won't even feel it if it's done properly.
Oh, so it's actually inside of your tissue.
If you get an X-ray, you'll see needles. And there have been a lot of times where this is not as common practice in the Western world. So in the Western world, a lot of people will have it done in places like Asia, Southeast Asia. They'll come get an X-ray and doctors start freaking out. And then they realize, okay, it's susuk. It seems like there hasn't been too many instances where it's been harmful to people. And it's like culturally a big thing. So just tell your doctor. But if you're craving beauty, if that's what you're asking for, it's often placed on the face, which makes sense because you want your face to be beautiful. And there are these rumors that Manohara has 1,000 gold needles in her face. These are what the jealous people are saying. It's probably nowhere near that if she even has any, but that's the only explanation that makes sense for everybody that's seen her. They say everybody who has met Manohara in person, whatever you see in pictures is only 1/10 of how beautiful she is in real life. She looks like the Angelina Jolie of Indonesia. That's how people describe her. Before she even graduates high school, she is named one of Indonesia's 100 most precious women by Harper's Bazaar in Indonesia. The rest of us, we're just like cold rice. But in all honesty, she's very stunning. Some say after she was born, her mom realized how beautiful she was, so she decided to take her down the beauty queen model route. Others say, no, her mom manifested this. When she was pregnant, she chose the name Manohara. Manohara in Sanskrit means the thief of hearts. August 2008, Manohara, the thief of hearts, gets invited to a high-profile political dinner, which sounds kind of strange, but it seems like Daisy, Manohara's mother, is this master networker. Mano is working as a model. Her mom is working on marketing her daughter to high society. She's trying to make Mano into a socialite. And the whole family is always attending random high-profile, high-security clearance events. And this dinner is even bigger. The people in the room are going to be some of the most powerful people in the entire nation, in the entire country. She sits down. Mano is probably a bit nervous, but she's handling it very well. And at the very end, after dessert has been served, Mano looks up and a woman is staring at her. Okay, I agree. It is to be done. She's good. The wedding will be on the 26th. Mano smiles and she's like, you're talking to me right now? She thought she was talking to somebody else. And she's like, okay, but you're looking at me. We're making eye contact. Is there somebody behind me? Because this doesn't make... What are you even saying right now? Somebody next to her hands her this piece of paper, and it's an invitation to a wedding. To Manohara's own wedding. She is getting invited to be the bride at her own wedding. You cannot be serious. What do you mean? The wedding date is set for the next week, 7 days. The groom is the man sitting right next to her, and Mano is laughing and she's giggling like, no, I'm not. The groom is just sitting next to her, all smiley. He's not equally confused. He's not wondering, wait, why am I getting married? I don't even know this girl like that. Nothing. He's just smiling, looking at her. He doesn't even look concerned that his potential hypothetical bride doesn't even want to marry him. It's very weird. The woman, the groom's mother, looks straight at her and says, you will be getting married this week. Everything has already been done, and if you don't do this, you will embarrass our family. And nobody embarrasses the royal family of Malaysia. The man sitting next to Mano is her future groom, Muhammad Fakhri Petra, the crown prince of Kelantan, one of the 9 royal families in Malaysia. Malaysia is very interesting. I believe it's the only system in the world that operates like this. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very fascinating. It's on a rotational monarchy system, which means they cycle through from one king to another every 5 years, and they have 9 royal families. So royal family 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and they will have 5 years each, and they cycle. Prince Fakhri belongs to the royal family of Kelantan, which is actually considered one of the most influential royal families in Malaysia. Their ancestry dates all the way back. Prince Fakhri is the younger brother of Sultan Muhammad V. Okay, I don't know if you guys listen to
they're from the same family?
Older brother. They're straight up brothers.
Whoa.
I don't know if you guys listen or watch my other podcast, Moral of the Story. You can find it on all podcast platforms, or I'll link it in the description of this video on YouTube. We did a whole episode on Sultan Muhammad V. He married a foreigner, had a child with her, and then completely acted like he did not marry her. He was allegedly double wifed up. It's a lot. He stated that their son was not his heir. There was so much drama. The situation was incredibly messy, but not on the same catastrophic scale that this incident is going to be. But in case you want more additional lore, that's going to be linked. That's his older brother. This is Prince Fakhri's older brother, Sultan Muhammad V of Kelantan. Wow. And now Mano is being told that she's going to be his bride, his princess. To be forward thinking, Prince Fakhri's chances of becoming the king of Malaysia are very slim to none, but still, she doesn't want it, okay? Thank you for the great honor that you have bestowed upon me, but also, I don't have time to be kingdom building and politicking around. I just want to live my life. I mean, let alone, who even is this man? She doesn't even really remember where she first met the prince the very first time. Her sister, Mano's sister, has to remind her, it was at the freaking party. The Malaysian prime minister at the time had invited us to this huge political dinner. We flew to Kuala Lumpur. It was a whole thing. Do you not remember? And we were sitting there, and it was this very intimate dinner party. And she's like, okay, yeah, that's right. I was sitting right next to the Prince of Malaysia, Prince Fakhri, one of the princes of Malaysia. And Mano doesn't even remember her very first impression of the prince. She's like, I think he was quiet. I think he was polite. But otherwise, he was very unremarkable. He did ask for her number during the dinner, but Mano just gave him her mom's number. Because, I mean, she's involved in charity work. She's involved in philanthropy. So she thought, okay, maybe just talk to my mom about it. It didn't feel like he was asking for anything more. He was just very polite. It was just pleasantries. That was their very first meeting. It did progress from there. The Prince of Malaysia suddenly, constantly had business in Indonesia. He would fly to Jakarta to do business, but also to meet up with Mano. And then sometimes when she'd be in Malaysia, he would take her and her parents out to dinner. The whole energy. I mean, yes, okay, fine. He did give her some expensive gifts here and there, but he's also the Prince of Malaysia. He probably has so much money that he just gives gifts to everybody. It didn't feel particularly special. It didn't feel like he was courting her that aggressively. So to some degree, I'm sure it's flattering that the prince is interested in marrying her, but with all due respect, Manohara is like, he's 14 years older than me. And it's kind of starting to show. He's balding. Which is not to say that he's not attractive, but people have their preferences. And more importantly than that, Manohara was 14 years old when they met. So he was double her age. He's not just 14 years older, she's 14. He's double her age.
And he was pursuing her.
Yes, that's why she had no idea he was pursuing her. Because she's like, do you know? I mean, you do know I am 14. She's 16 now when they tell her that she's getting married, which is still no good at all. But she was 14 when they first met.
Whoa.
So it's very unclear how any of this is okay, but clearly Manohara is not interested. She's 16. She's trying to focus on her career. No offense. She's not interested in some old man. She didn't even in a million years think that he was interested. She says, I just didn't see anything between us. Honestly, I didn't even consider him a close friend. I just considered him somebody I knew. It was kind of like, you know, you go to dinner with your mom and a family friend of your mom, and you know that they're probably an influential powerful person and you're bored out of your mind, but you have to act like you're interested. But ultimately, you feel like you're there because your mom is there. Mm-hmm. They're not coming to meet you.
Yeah, and then the next day you found out that you guys are getting married.
Yeah, and you get invited to your own wedding.
Wow.
She also has a boyfriend back home in Indonesia, and she's like, okay, by the way, I also have a boyfriend that is a lot more age appropriate. So perhaps this union is ill-advised. Maybe we could go back to the drawing board. She at first politely declines, and then later she starts aggressively declining because nobody is taking no for an answer. The prince's mom is telling her, we have already sent out the invitations. We have set up a venue. If you do not do this, this will be a huge embarrassment for the whole royal family. Manohara is known to be incredibly graceful, but she is putting her foot down. Frankly speaking, I mean, this may sound a little bit rude, ma'am, but I don't care what was done to prepare for the wedding. I'm not getting married. It's already creepy, but it's just getting weirder because why are they being so persistent? Manohara is thinking, he's the prince. I'm sure if you put out a little bolo, be on the lookout or anything, there would be age-appropriate women lining out the palace gates if they knew that he was trying to get married next week. Why me? I'm not even Malaysian. What's going on? The feeling is probably something along the lines of, who died and made you king? But clearly not applicable in this situation. August 26, 2008, Mano becomes dubbed the most beautiful princess in Malaysia. They get married. They get married with a 6-tier wedding cake, a big diamond wedding band. They get the legal permissions required for the two because, you know, despite their age difference and despite the fact that she's a minor, they are officially husband and wife, prince and princess.
Wow.
Mano is no longer modeling. She is no longer able to do her own career. She is a full-time royal attending public events with her new husband. And listen, netizens are entitled to their different opinions about this. Some people were upset that she's giving up everything for this man. Other people were really impressed that she's able to handle herself with so much grace publicly at such a young age. And all netizens at the time, this was the sentiment. This is not how I think. This was the sentiment that was out there. A lot of netizens believed that there was so much proof that Mano was living the good life, the fairy tale life. I mean, every time she's seen in public, she's smiling. But that's, I mean, you kind of expect every royal to be smiling. But she appears to have gained quite a bit of weight. So prior to this, she's a model and she was, I guess, living by the stereotypical, very unhealthy model standards of being very, very skinny. And she was slowly gaining weight and looking healthier and healthier by a lot of people's standards. And the public sentiment being, she's living the good life. She's living the good life in the palace with comfort, delicious, chef-curated meals likely. I mean, she's living the fairy tale dream. Look at her. She looks good. Every aspect of her public life, people are like, that is the dream. Someone write one of those princess stories about Mano. Young girl swept up by a prince, now showered with comfort, luxury, and and the prince, he is so protective of her. Anytime she's out in public, she's got like 10 bodyguards. It's like he's obsessed with her. He's in love with her. It seems like if Mano were to trip on her own gown and get a tiny little paper cut, the bodyguards would be in big trouble. That's what it feels like. He seems like a prince straight out of a K-drama, just lovingly protective over his new young wife, which makes sense because Mano's not a typical princess. I will say, it was very difficult for people to hate on Mano. I think a lot of the times when you have, especially with a monarchy and a foreign bride coming in, especially one that is so young and is not as established. So a lot of times royals will marry foreigners, but they have an established career. A lot of them are well educated, have a very fruitful life. So I guess that is good marketing. Mm-hmm. But with Mano, she was a model. And some people, I guess, could call her an influencer model and all these things. But a lot of people loved her in Malaysia. By the time that she was 14, she was already speaking English, Indonesian, French. She's incredibly cultured, well-traveled. She lived in Jakarta, Hong Kong, Romania, Vienna, Switzerland, England, France, then back to Jakarta. I mean, she's seen so much of the world, they thought maybe she's ready to be a princess. Maybe she's the princess we never knew that we needed. She was heavily involved in charity work even prior to becoming the princess. It just seems like all the interests were aligned. She's dignified, composed, and yes, she's young, but that's probably only going to get better and more refined and more elegant as she gets older. So that makes a lot of sense. Until one night at another royal party, Manahara's standing there in her gown. She's exchanging pleasantries with everyone. Hi, nice to meet you. Yes. Oh, that's incredible. Great. She's introduced to this very influential businessman, international businessman. He does a lot of work in Indonesia as well as Malaysia. And the minute their hands touch, this is like their second time meeting. The minute that their hands touch, he feels something. It's kind of painful. It's like she's digging her nail into his hand. And he looks up at her and she's still smiling. Her lips are smiling, but there's something about the way she's looking at him. It looks like she's staring through him with this intense glare.
Wait, what exactly is she doing?
Shaking his hand, but she's like not letting go and digging her nails into his palm. And he's looking at her, but her face and what she's doing with her hand is not matching. Her hand is trying to rip his flesh off and her eyes are kind of intensely glaring at him, but she's smiling. Okay, so weird. And then he's about to pull his hand back and he feels something thick in his hand, kind of crumply. Her lips turn up in a little bit of a small smile, but she seems very anxious. Now, had this businessman lacked a little more EQ, had lacked some social awareness, he might have asked her in front of everyone, including her husband, the prince, "What's wrong? Are you all right? What did you just pass me in your hand?" But he did not. He does not, okay? It's pretty obvious that whatever the princess is trying to tell him, she doesn't want anyone else to know. He smiles right back, and when they're out of sight, he opens up the palm of his hand, and it's a little piece of napkin and a note written in eyeliner. "Help me."
You're kidding me.
No.
This is like a movie.
Yeah. And so he's shocked. He doesn't even know what to do. And it's like hunting. There's this thing they used to do way back in the day. It's kind of like hunting. The whole village would be in on it. The woman would hide the main character of the day. Let's call her Susie. The women in the village would hide Susie. And this man knows that the women are protecting Susie. But they're all trying to be part of the fun, right? He goes to the home of Susie and he asks Susie's parents, "Can I have Susie's hand in marriage?" Susie's dad thinks about it, ponders for a little bit and says, "Yes. Now go find my daughter and strip her naked." And the call has been put out. The women in the village have taken Susie. They're putting her in 81 layers of clothing. They're wrapping fishnet straps, wrapping it around her body. He has to find whoever looks like a walking mummy because that's going to be his future bride, Susie. And then he has to fully strip her naked. And that would mean once she's fully nude, the two of them are finally able to be wed. I mean, she's going to put on clothes again for the wedding, but this is the tradition. And while he's stripping his future bride, the other women in the neighborhood will come out and they'll beat him, which honestly, the stories say some of them will beat him in a way that makes it feel like, is this no longer a game right now? Like they're seriously trying to wound this man. But that's the point. He has to prove that he is worthy. And the game must continue for several days until he finds Susie, gets her away from all the other women in the village, fights off the other women, and strips her naked. And it usually results in a bruised groom walking down the aisle.
What story is this? I'm sorry.
It's a wedding tradition that used to take place back in the day that a lot of people would practice. And it just goes to show that a lot of cultures have different types of wedding traditions that you can't really judge because it's all fun and games. But now Mano, she's in Malaysia and she's never heard of this wedding tradition. This doesn't even feel like a wedding tradition. She's supposed to be sleeping on the floor on her wedding night. What does that even mean? She's not even supposed to be here. She was told that in Malaysia, right after the wedding, they convinced her, go through with the wedding. You'll be the most beautiful princess of Malaysia. She's like, I don't care. They tell her, okay, well, right after the wedding, right after the ceremony, you can fly back to Jakarta, do your modeling business, whatever. You can live your life. Okay, fine. She goes through with the wedding, and now they're not letting her go back to Indonesia. They're making her stay put in the prince's home in the royal palace of Kelantan. And somehow she ends up sleeping on the floor because she refused to be his wife and go to bed with him. Is this a wedding tradition? What's happening here? And she claims for that, she must sleep on the floor for not sleeping with him. This is how the marriage between the crown prince and Mano begins. And it ends with a high-profile escape in a foreign country, with Mano escaping from the royal bodyguards, accusing the prince of holding her captive and torturing her. Prince Fakhri's father is hospitalized in Singapore. And this is actually mentioned more in depth in our other episode, but he gets sick, and that's how his son, Prince Fakhri's brother, Sultan Muhammad V, declares himself Sultan of Kelantan. Remember?
Right.
Yes, it's a very big political debacle. He goes to Singapore, he's in the hospital, and the whole royal family has gathered there to support the most powerful man in all of Kelantan. Prince Fakhri, Mano, and the prince's staff are staying at this fancy hotel in Singapore. And most of Mano's days in Singapore have been under strict watch in the hotel room or in the hospital.
So how old is she now, and how long have they been?
She is 18 at this point. They've been married for like
A few years.
a year and a half. Yeah. She might not leave Malaysia again for weeks once they leave Singapore. She doesn't know when else she'll be out of Malaysia because she knows when she's in Malaysia, she can't do anything. She's married to someone so powerful, part of the royal family, one of the 9 royal families in Malaysia. What power does she have in Malaysia? But right now, they're on foreign soil. They're in Singapore. This is her chance. She doesn't know if she's going to leave Malaysia ever again, because prior to all of this, prior to the then Sultan of Kelantan, so Prince Fakhri's father getting sick and being hospitalized in Singapore, she was not really allowed to ever leave Malaysia. It's easier to control her when she's in Malaysia. This is her only chance. She asks if she can go down to the lobby to fetch something, and the bodyguards have to escort her. They take her out of her room. They walk down the hotel hallway. They get into the elevator, and they're all standing there. It's just her and the royal bodyguards inside of this random hotel elevator in Singapore, and she looks up. And there's that little black half ball on the ceiling, the CCTV camera. And she says very calmly, there are CCTV cameras inside this elevator. The bodyguards are thrown off. Like, what a random thing to say out of nowhere. I mean, is that a threat? Before they can even react, Mano's hand is already pressing up against the emergency button in the elevator. The alarms start blaring. Everyone in the hotel is going to hear it. Not only that, when the emergency stop button is pressed on the elevator, more than likely the police have to respond immediately. Regardless of if it's a false alarm or not, police have to show up on the premises. So now the alarms are going off. It's just Mano and a handful of bodyguards in the elevator. They're trying to restrain her. They're trying to sedate her. I mean, perhaps the princess has lost her mind. Maybe that's what they're going to tell the police. The princess has been under a lot of stress after the sultan has been sick. She doesn't like traveling too much. She was beyond herself, so she pressed the emergency button. But she keeps reminding them, we are not in Malaysia anymore. You try to do anything, we are in Singapore. Everything is caught on cameras. The bodyguards back off. Mano starts screaming for help. She's banging on the doors. The hotel staff arrive. The police arrive. And crazy enough, Mano's mom and sister arrive. The businessman that she passed the note to, ever since she passed that note, he's pretty close to the royal family. He's an influential businessman. He has been getting updates on Mano, trying to track where she's going. And once they left for Singapore, because the Sultan was sick, he contacted Daisy, Mano's mom, saying, she's in Singapore, she's staying at this hotel, you gotta go find her.
Oh, you gotta go save her.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're all there.
What?
They've all arrived. The prince is running out of the room trying to calm the princess down. He's allegedly got a firm grip on Mano. Now, from this perspective, the prince has denied all of these allegations. So just keep in mind, these are allegations. He's got a firm grip on Mano, trying to tell the authorities that his wife is probably freaked out. She's spooked. She's been exhausted. They'll see to it that she's taken care of. But Manahara does not want to go with him, and the prince does not want to let her go. The Singaporean authorities have to tell him every single person has the right to freedom in Singapore, regardless of marital status. Let your wife go. When he lets her go, Mano reaches into her pocket, shows the authorities her passport. She's like, I need to leave immediately. And what's crazy is Manahara is half Indonesian and half American. So her dad, her biological father, is an American citizen. The US embassy got involved in Singapore as well.
So she pulled out her passport.
It's a US passport.
Interesting.
And she's like, you need to help me. So this is escalating. So many countries are getting involved. Now you got Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, the United States of America. So much is happening. And she's saying, I cannot go back to Malaysia. My time in Malaysia, I was held captive at the Royal Palace of Kelantan, and I have been tortured on a daily basis. The princess is accusing the prince of being a kidnapper, abuser, and a torturer. Manohara has to explain to the police everything that's happened so far. She's basically like, do you want the short version or the long version at this point? Because things were happening every single day that she was married that should not be happening.
So right now, what's going on? Once she took out her passport, like they basically took her into the police station?
Yes, so they separated her from the prince, and now she's in the embassy talking to officials. And she's explaining, not only am I going to leave, which is not really a question. Of course, she has her own free will to leave. She just wants their protection to get to the airport and board a plane that is not headed to Malaysia.
Where is she going?
She wants to go back to Jakarta. She wants to go home. So at this point, her mom is residing in Indonesia. So she's like, I just want to go home, please. These are the following allegations from the princess to the prince. Mano explains to the authorities that one of the main reasons that Mano did not want to marry the prince initially, other than the obvious, was there was an incident. Mano claims that all of them had gone on a cruise, and this was again when she just felt like he is a family friend, a powerful family friend that her mom is networking with. One night, the prince comes into Mano's room. He concocts this lie about wanting to speak with her about something urgent and needing privacy, which, yeah, she thought was weird, but she allowed him in, and he had this determined, angry look on his face because why would he be angry? It doesn't make sense. He forces her onto the bed, allegedly. This is her allegations. And without her consent, the prince allegedly essays her in the cruise cabin and just leaves when he's done, as if nothing has happened at all. This is when she's a minor. I mean, she was married as a minor. This is when she was like 15. Mana said that she felt scared, helpless. She said, basically, I shut down. I just didn't know what to think of myself. I was in denial about the whole thing. I just didn't want to believe any of it, so I just tried to completely block it out. Afterwards, he was suddenly very nice to me. He was extremely sweet and gentlemanly. Mano wanted to tell the authorities, but they were on a cruise in Malaysia. She didn't have proof. She didn't have a video or anything. And even if she did, who would believe her? This would be a huge mess. Malaysia, I mean, likely, wouldn't you expect that they would protect a royal family member? It's not the right thing to do. But like, look at corruption, not just in Malaysia, but like literally everywhere, even in the United States. People are protecting the powerful people all the time from accusations like this. She tries her best to get over it. She thought it was, I think she's trying to reason with herself that maybe it was a one-time thing, that he was drunk or something, because this is the Prince of Malaysia. I think that her brain was having a hard time computing that he would do something like this. She was just second-guessing, questioning herself. But the situation comes up again. The night of their wedding, when he brings her back to his home, which again, she did not think that she was going back to his home. She thought she was going back to Indonesia after the ceremony. She gets escorted back to his home where he allegedly screams at her, telling her that she's never going to go back home. And then he tries to have intimate relations with her, and she clarifies that she does not want to, which is enough reason, no is no. But also, she's on her menstrual cycle. And it appears that, allegedly, he cares more about the latter than the former. He was like, menstrual cycle. He screams at her. All Indonesians, allegedly screams at her, all Indonesians are prostitutes and can be bought. Thank God I did you before our wedding. Allegedly referencing the essay of when she was a minor, and is still a minor now that they're married. She said every day after that, she was restricted from seeing her own family. Her passport was confiscated. She could not talk to her family without being supervised. She was held captive in the palace, being verbally assaulted on a daily basis until she finally escapes. She heads over to the hospital. This is in Malaysia. This was her first escape. She walked to a hospital.
Wait, what? Oh, she just ran out of the palace and ran straight to a hospital.
Yes, no, she was at the hospital for a checkup.
Oh.
Okay, this is after their wedding. She hasn't been able to leave Malaysia. She hasn't been able to talk to anybody. He's been verbally abusing her and physically allegedly assaulting her this whole time. And then she goes to the hospital for a routine checkup. Naturally, she has to bring her ID because how do you explain to the doctors, sorry, my husband is a famous prince. You might know him. He holds me captive. I don't have access to my own passport. So she has her passport, and she said that she finally flees, runs from the hospital, just sneaks out with her passport, gets on the first flight back to Jakarta the same day, and now she's back in Indonesia. And she still says she knows no peace because this man is calling every single day. Well, actually, it's worse than that. The prince himself is not even the one calling. He's having his staff calling, begging for her return. They're not even begging, they're scolding her, telling her it's a sin for a wife to leave her husband, that she needs to honor their marriage and get back to the palace now. At one point, she alleges that he even hires the top mafia-esque boss in Indonesia to bring her back to Malaysia, saying, you got to do this no matter what it takes. But thankfully, Mano is friends with his son. It's like a movie. It's crazy. Mano is friends with the mafia boss's son, and he warns her, your husband just called my dad and was like, we got to kidnap her and bring her to Malaysia, allegedly. None of this works. The prince then resorts to what he does best. He starts calling Manahara's mom, Daisy. He's setting the scene, painting the picture, drawing pancakes in the sky, which is a Chinese saying of just wishful thinking. Hey, look up at the sky. There's a pancake I drew for you. You're never going to eat the pancake. The pancake's not real. It's just false hope. He tells her, I've sinned. I want to show you that I'm really, really remorseful and I'm going to fix this. This was my first time getting married. I was excited and, things happened. He asks her, Daisy, and Manahara to meet him at the Mecca so that he can truly ask for forgiveness. They're all Muslim. Daisy believes the prince because you're talking about the Mecca. Like, you're talking about very serious things that you just don't say lightly. This is a very serious commitment. And perhaps he did overindulge himself as a newlywed husband and did not know how to behave. I don't know. For whatever reason, Daisy convinces Manahara to go with her to see the prince and at least hear him out. They arrive, and the prince from the very first night that Mano has ever met him is there. Very politically sound, media-trained, polite, still balding, but well-mannered. He's there again. Maybe things are going to change. They spend a few nights there before their scheduled flight back to Malaysia, where Mano, Daisy, and Mano's sister are going to join the prince's family to celebrate a royal birthday. Someone's birthday in the family. So they all booked their flights already. They're supposed to be on a 9 p.m. flight on Malaysian Airlines to Malaysia, but instead, the bodyguard does not drive them to the international airport. They're going straight to a private jet tarmac. And Daisy's thinking, my sweet son-in-law, I knew he's back. He wants us to take a private plane back. We've been exhausted. That makes sense. What a wonderful man. See, he really is sorry and he's trying to make amends. But instead, he kidnaps Mano, leaving Daisy and her other daughter, Mano's sister, just on the tarmac while they fly off.
That's crazy.
Mano's mother, Daisy, claims when she gets back to Indonesia, she's completely in shambles trying to figure out how to get her daughter back. She can't even get in contact with her daughter. She gets a call from the royal family telling her, there is a condo ready for you. How much do you want? Let go of Manahara. She claims that she said, no, I don't need a stupid condo. You can take anything from me. You can even take my organs, but you're not going to take my daughter. Give me my daughter back. They cannot have my daughter, not this way. I agreed for the prince to be married to my daughter, but not like this. What did I do to receive this kind of treatment? I was like the prince's mother. How could he have done this to us? To me, he just left me blind on the runway. Mano claims the abuse starts getting really bad once she gets kidnapped on this private jet and brought back to Malaysia. She says that she was essayed more times than she could count. When he was not abusing her, she alleges that he forced her to do a whole list of chores every day. She claims that once she was ironing his clothes, he came up with a cigarette in his mouth, walked up smoking, and nonchalantly grabbed the iron from her hand and pushed it into her skin. She starts screaming in pain, and with his other hand, he grabs his cigarette butt and starts pressing it into her face above her eyebrow. That is during the day. At night, she alleges that he would sedate her. Sometimes she would be in a really deep slumber, just unconscious, out like a light, not recollecting anything that happened. Other times, she was given a paralytic, which was worse. She's technically awake. She knows what's going on, but her body cannot move. It temporarily paralyzes your body. She's vulnerable and powerless, and that is when the alleged razor abuse starts occurring. She states that after injecting her with paralytics, the prince would grab a razor blade and start slicing her chest with it. There are pictures. She was able to sneak a picture of the abuse, alleged abuse. It's really bad. I don't even know if I can show it. I'm gonna see. But she is aware of everything that's going on. I want to say it looks like 300 slash marks on her chest. She says she can't move or scream. She says, I could see him, hear him, smell him, feel him. I could feel the cuts on my body. It hurt. Just knowing that you have no control over anything and can't do anything about it was just... The worst part is he didn't even slash it fast or anything. He just took his time slowly. He looked as calm as ever. It's like you gave someone a paintbrush and told him to draw a flower. Just the peacefulness that he exhibited when he was cutting into me. It took over 20 minutes. The physical pain was not as much as the psychological feeling. I just couldn't even defend myself. I was completely helpless. Even animals got more respect than I did in that house. He just stood there looking at me. I could feel everything. Emotionally, it was terrible. Instead of hurting me fast, he preferred to do it slowly. I could see the pleasure in his eyes. It was like he enjoyed doing it. She tried to tell the Sultana what was happening. So this is the prince's mother. And the biggest response... Okay, so this is where it gets confusing. Technically, he's not labeled a prince. It's a different word, but it is a prince. It's like the crown prince. And Sultana is kind of like the sultana of that area, but she's not the queen of Malaysia unless it's their round.
Okay.
But this is the prince's mother.
Okay.
But technically not the queen, right?
Yeah.
So she alerts the sultana that this is happening. And she claims the sultana just tells her, it is your duty as a wife to please your husband, get pregnant, and give us a grandchild. That's it. If she ever tried to run away or did not look happy at a public event, she claims that she was beaten badly. Meanwhile, she has to listen to everyone talk about how she lives a fairy tale life now. And the weight gain. She says the weight gain was happening because the prince was allegedly forcing her to take fertility treatment shots, which was making her gain weight rapidly. Allegedly, he was trying to get her pregnant. Mano did not know what to do. She would just have to attend these royal appearances. She said she was running through every single scenario. She said, if I scream, if I do anything here, they have the most power. So A, I'm going to get hurt when I get home to be punished. Or B, they're going to increase the security and it's going to be harder for me to do anything ever again or try to leave again. That's why Mano always put on a fake smile in public. It's not until she meets that businessman who she knows has a lot of connections in Indonesia. And I believe that businessman is relatively connected to Mano's mother. Like they know of each other. So this is not just some random man. She passes him the note. And he's not able to really help her, but he is able to alert her mother that she's in Singapore. And they were booking the first flight out to Singapore that day. She alleges that from that day that she was taken on that private jet, it was 9 months that she was held captive, held against her will like a prisoner in the prince's estate. However, a big however, she says she doesn't want people to think that there's a problem with the whole monarchy. She says people keep getting the wrong idea, thinking that because I'm saying this, that I despise Malaysia, that I hate Malaysia or the Malaysian royals. It's not about Malaysia. It's about one specific individual. It has nothing to do with the whole country. Kings are like ordinary people. Some are good, some are bad. Just because I had a bad experience with one does not mean all are like that. So with that, Singaporean authorities let Manahara go back home to Indonesia. The prince heads back to Malaysia and all hell breaks loose. So very briefly, everybody in Indonesia, there were riots on the streets in Indonesia. People were protesting, saying like, how could we have let this happen? They knew about the abuse prior to her being freed in Singapore. Because the businessman had told Mano's mother, and Daisy was trying to get news media to focus on her daughter is literally trapped in Malaysia by the royals. So it was a huge thing in Indonesia. In Malaysia, not as much. But in terms of the scale, the netizens that know, it seems like there are 3 camps of people. One that believe that Mano was let down by everyone. Just the idea of being shipped off to be wed at 16 years old in 2008, it doesn't make sense. But some netizens also understand Daisy. Maybe from Manahara's mother's perspective, it's impossible to say no to the Prince of Malaysia. They think that the entire Manahara family was victimized by the royal family and Manahara got the brunt of the abuse. Then you have the second group of people. You have those that believe there are a lot of bad intentions throughout the entirety of the marriage. They think Daisy did not do enough due diligence and did not put her child first. It seems like she was excited to have her daughter marry the future king, not really the future king, but a royal. Maybe Manahara herself wanted something out of the union as well. That's what some people believe. But ultimately, they think the worst person in all of this to blame is still the prince. Then you have the third group of people who do not believe these allegations at all. They believe the prince is the victim. Maybe he wasn't the best fiance, maybe he wasn't the best husband, but there are some people out there that feel like he has been duped by a gold digger's family, Daisy and Manahara, mainly Daisy. They believe that Daisy masterminded this whole thing to get her own daughter to seduce him, get him married to Manahara, then throw the book at him, accusing him of all sorts of heinous acts. I will say, I think the people in this camp, or even the second, are the most limited. I think the majority of people think that Manahara is just the victim in all of this, and they have mixed feelings about Daisy, but ultimately they're just focused on Manahara. However, the third group that believe that the prince is innocent, they're passionate, and they mainly point to a few things. One, the prince sued Manahara and Daisy for defamation and was awarded $1.8 million by the Malaysian courts. I will say that it's in Malaysia. He conveniently happens to be the prince of Malaysia with the potential to have deep connections with the justice system because, politics is fun that way. But the attorney for the prince states, from to cutting her with a razor to injecting her, these are only things a monster would do, a psychopath. My client wants the truth to come out. Sources close to the prince state that he believes Manahara is being manipulated by her mother to say these things about him that he knows and Manahara knows are not true. The attorney asks if there are cuts on her breasts. The marks are supposed to be there. Where are her scars? So Manahara has a picture of the abuse, but it has healed since then. But the attorney, I guess, is saying, well, if it's that bad, why doesn't she have scars? Which I don't really understand that argument. There are also rumors circulating, I don't know how much truth they hold, but rumors circulating that the prince still wants Manahara back. That against his own family's wishes, he believes that if Manahara just comes back, he can get her to take back all the allegations because he believes none of this is true. Daisy is whispering in her ear, this is what we need to do. One supposed insider states, I've never seen a man so obsessed with a woman. The people in his province also love her. They view her like Princess Diana. He needs her back for his credibility. His attorney adds to those rumors by stating, there is an element of sadness because he, the prince, truly loves Mano. If I was in his position, I wouldn't love her anymore, but perhaps the prince thinks she is too young and too brainwashed by her own mother. That's the first reason people believe the prince is innocent. The second one is admittedly more complicated. It is that Manahara's mother, Daisy, the one that helped facilitate the wedding, that received a dowry of $250,000 for the wedding. So she received money from the prince's family, and she is a wanted fugitive in France.
What?
She is a wanted woman, literally. It has been stated that Daisy was sentenced in absentia by the French court to 18 months in prison. If she were to ever stop in France, let it be a layover, she will be arrested instantaneously.
For what?
She allegedly... Okay, hold on to the wording of this. She allegedly allowed her adopted daughter to be essayed by her husband. So we have Manahara's biological father, who is an American. He left when Manahara was 2 years old. Daisy then married a French man, who Manahara sees like her own father. She feels like this is more her father than her actual biological father. He's French. Now, she allegedly allowed her adopted daughter, so Manahara's adoptive sister, to be essayed by her husband. The wording is strange because the situation is strange. Because what do you mean she allowed? Second of all, she has an adopted daughter. Let me clarify. Daisy's French husband told the French court that Daisy forced him to undress and caress Daisy's adopted daughter. It's very unclear if this is her adopted daughter. Court records refer to her as the adopted daughter, but it's kind of question mark. This is a young girl that Daisy took in, and it is said that she was supposed to be a housekeeper for Daisy, kind of like a live-in helper right? Of sorts. But Daisy slowly started treating her like her own daughter and maybe potentially has even legally adopted her. But this is not a pure adoption of Daisy sees a girl and she's like, oh, I want her to be my daughter. I feel a bond with her. I feel connected with her. I want her to be another child of mine. It's not like that. It seems like she kind of started as a housekeeper, maybe was adopted for other reasons, legal reasons. And Daisy claims she was treating her like one of her own. The adopted daughter says, no, she wasn't. She was treating me like a servant that was on call 24/7. Regardless, Daisy's husband tells the French court, no, Daisy would force me to undress and caress the adopted daughter every single night. And every day it would just escalate from there until, of course, it went all the way, essay. And if nobody, he said that he was scared of Daisy, his own wife, because if nobody did as Daisy told them to do, she would get very upset. And as evidence of that, he claims that Daisy would chop off the adoptive daughter's hair if she didn't listen to her as punishment.
So he went ahead and essayed her.
Yeah. And he got like a few months in prison.
What?
And Daisy, she fled to Indonesia before the trial. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison in absentia. France and Indonesia do not appear to have an extradition treaty, meaning she is in Indonesia as a technical fugitive, which of course makes Daisy look bad. But Daisy disagrees. She says she's actually been ready to return to France to challenge the court's judgment. She is just nervous that the justice system is corrupt. She states all these allegations brought upon by the adopted daughter are false, fake. She says that she brought the adopted daughter to France to stay with her and her husband. This is when the adopted daughter was like 15 and she lived with her for a few years. She was supposed to be there as like a housekeeper, but Daisy treated her way better than that. This is what Daisy's saying. Daisy's like, look at these pictures. Look at the pictures of my two biological daughters and the adopted daughter. They're all wearing the same expensive scarves. I treat them all the same. I was the nicest, kindest person to her. I even offered to pay for her schooling in France and she declined. She declined. And then eventually one day, I'm going out to run errands, and then halfway down the block, I realize I forget my headphones. So I turn back, open the door to my French apartment, and there the two of them are in our marital bed. The adopted daughter and Daisy's husband. She states, I was extremely hurt. I had treated her like my own daughter since she was 15, and I was so in love with my husband. These allegations are absolutely lies. Absolute. She claims they did have intimate relations, but it was all consensual and she did not encourage or facilitate them, but rather she was devastated by it. Daisy continues, she did not even leave me a letter to apologize. She just left after I caught her. Once she left, though, she claimed to have been abused, forced into all of this, that, and the third. That's what she says. Irregardless of that, there are a lot of people hesitant to support Daisy. That's not to say that's a reason to support an alleged abuser. Like, there is a reason to support an alleged abuser. But there are people that think, okay, this on top of Daisy's firm grip on Mano's life. They bring up the fact that when Manahara was very young, a lot of insider sources say that Daisy would control everything that she wore, ate, the way she spoke. It seems like Daisy gave birth to her, realized that she has the potential to be very physically beautiful, and has molded her into becoming a socialite to further enhance the status of the entire family, is what people believe. Other netizens disagree because Mano had told reporters before that she enjoys being a model. She likes her line of work. She's very passionate. She has time to make friends. She's a homebody. It just seems like maybe we're being too opinionated. So a lot of people are just going back and forth on how to feel about Daisy. But the allegations against the prince are independent of what's happening with Daisy. Mm-hmm. But additionally, there are a few other aspects that people do think is weird. When Mano was first rescued in Singapore, the authorities asked her if she wanted to press charges against her husband in Singapore. She ultimately declined, which some netizens thought was weird. They were questioning, did you decline because you know that once an investigation is triggered, they're going to poke holes into your story? But Mano and her family states, no, she didn't press charges because Singaporean authorities wanted her to stay in the country for at least a few more days to file the charges, and Manahara just wanted to go back home. She did not want to stay here. She didn't want to stay in this foreign country where she just wanted to be home finally. After 9 months of torture, she wanted to feel at home. Additionally, as for where the lawsuit stands, where the Malaysian courts awarded the prince nearly $2 million for defamation, Manahara says she will never pay a penny to the prince. Matter of fact, she wants him to come to Indonesia to file another lawsuit if he so wishes to clear his name. If we're gonna bring up everybody's messy history, we gotta bring up the prince. After the prince sues Manahara for defamation, he also sues his own family. He files a defamation suit against palace officials because the royal palace released a statement that they had nothing to do with his marital problems. When news breaks, they're like, hey, just a reminder, that's happening behind closed doors. We don't really know what's going on. Just kind of distancing themselves from Prince Fakhri. They're just protecting themselves from a potential political fallout, because you have to remember, this is not even just happening in Malaysia. You're talking about Indonesia's involved. The United States is potentially involved. But the prince felt like it's almost implying his guilt. So he filed a lawsuit against the royal palace, which the court obviously threw out the case. They threw it out. But a few months later, he comes back into court with another stack of papers. He is suing his brother, Sultan Muhammad V.
What?
Over a Bentley, a Bentley, stating that he owns the Bentley, but the Sultan Muhammad V is like, no, I own the Bentley. It was a little ridiculous. People are like, you have energy to be suing people, your own brother, the Sultan, over a Bentley when you are accused of some of the most atrocious acts against a woman?
It's so interesting. You know the last time when you talked about that story?
Yes.
The Muhammad V?
Yes.
Like a lot of Malaysians in the comments were saying that they've never heard of it.
Yeah. Okay, we had our Malaysian researcher work on this case as well. And she said, wait, what's happening? Like, I haven't even heard of this really. Like, there were like small, very in passing, oh, something happened. It was a thing, but it was never, oh, I know these were the allegations. This is how it was broken down.
Yeah.
So it's very fascinating. If you guys are Malaysian, please let me know in the comments. Is there something that we missed or miscommunicated or mistranslated? Or did you not know about this at all? Or did you know more that we don't know? Please leave that in the comments. Yeah, it's so fascinating. A few days after that, one of the prince's other brothers removes him from the Council of Succession, which oversees the succession of the throne. Prince Fakhri took him to court to be restored to the council. There's a lot of messiness going on. And Manahara just tells the authorities, look, he's not like a husband. He did all of this abuse to me with such ease. I was only a toy to him. I could never think a normal man could do such things. I've been treated like an animal. I'm like his property, and I was in his room, and whenever he wanted to play with me, he would just go into the room and play with me like I'm some sort of object. He told me, matter of fact, once, you are my property. She says she's not going to let this get to her, though. She says, look, it's happened. I believe that everything happens for a reason, and that has shaped me to be who I am today. When I see people needing help, and having been in a position where I desperately needed help as much as I can, I will help. Mano is now trying to focus on her career, her charity work. Prior to getting married, she was heavily vested in various causes. It's only gotten stronger since the divorce. As for Daisy, she says, I just didn't see the signs. I thought he was charming. There are some netizens, though, that believe, again, Daisy and Mano got exactly what they asked for. They comment, 17-year-old gold digger, what did she expect? What? Newspaper says slash wounds and cuts are fresh. Sounds self-inflicted to me. Others comment, it's all about the money. The more she finds evidence, the more the prince is willing to settle. Whack the prince with bad news for 2 weeks, threaten with lawsuits, and behind the scenes, prince will be willing to cut a check for $20 million or more for her to go away. She's quite hot looking. She must suck big time in bed to incur such violence. Isn't it obvious? She must have read too many fairy tales about marrying a prince, considering she's homeschooled. Can a wife file a case against her husband for SA? I thought once married, the wife cannot file SA charges against her own husband.
Wow.
Some netizens think the fact that the prince is, in their opinion, aggressively not conventionally attractive, their opinion, they say that this is proof that Mano is a gold digger, saying there's no way that she could find any interest in a man like this if it weren't for his status, power, and money. And I'm not sure why they must be reminded that she was a minor when they got married. Did you forget that? What's going on in the power imbalance? Did you forget that? So a lot of netizens, they blame the prince mainly. And then you have a big chunk of netizens that blame the prince and Daisy, Mano's mother. And then a small group that blame Manahara. I would say that most just feel really bad for Manahara. It feels like she was, to some degree, used as a political and power pawn by the prince and perhaps potentially her family as well. I don't know if Daisy was intentionally doing this, but maybe she just got swept up in the promises and the promises of a better future. Manahara is now in her 30s, focusing on things that she wants to do. She's been involved in a lot of activism, and it's just been interesting to see how little our Malaysian researcher knew about this case prior to deep diving in. It's very fascinating. And also, even internationally, I feel like this is normally something that would make international headlines for a while. I feel like even in the US, we would hear about it to some degree, right? It seems like the only place that has had heavy coverage on this case is in Indonesia. So if you guys are Indonesian, please leave it in the comments as well. What are we missing? How do you feel about the situation? So a lot of people are saying that Indonesia, she is seen almost as this heroine that has lived and experienced this insane amount of torture, but has come out even stronger. She's almost seen as this person to protect. And then in Malaysia, some see her as a gold digger. I would say this is a smaller group. I would think that most Malaysians who know the full length of the allegations, a lot of them are just surprised that they don't know. So I was on a few forums and they're like, as a Malaysian, I didn't know and I feel so bad. And they also critique the monarchy. I would say that the Malaysians critique their monarchy heavily, but it's just been interesting. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.